BTW, staying calm under pressure. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. My guest today is Kenny Choat, Director of Property Maintenance at Thomas Thrift. In our conversation today, Kenny shares his career journey, the importance of discipline and calmness in crisis situations, and the value of hands-on training and mentorship in our industry. We also touch on the importance of company culture and employee support. We also spend a little bit of time highlighting the positive aspects of certain organizations and the effect their culture has on their maintenance professionals. Join me and Kenny as we go beyond the work.
Welcome to Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. My name is Chris Caramano. As a 15-plus year veteran in the apartment industry, I have stories to tell, a desire to hear and tell others' stories. As a multiple committee member for NAA, a CAMT advisory board member and a CAMT holder, and a national presenter and educator, I have met and worked with so many great people in our industry at all different levels. This is not going to be a how-to podcast. This is going to be a how-did podcast. We are going to explore the how-did tales in multifamily maintenance. How did we do it? How did we learn from it? How did we grow? How did we decide not to do it again? Join me as we go beyond the work.
Kenny, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance.
Thank you for having me.
So you and I have the privilege of both working with Angie, and she's the one that actually introduced us. But I'll be honest, I know very little about your journey into the multifamily industry and where you got today as the director of property maintenance for Thompson Thrift. So can you just walk me through, how'd you get into the business, and how did you get to where you are now?
So I started in 2002 when I got out of the military. I got into new home construction, and I did that for a little while. And then I went to become a union painter. I got my journeyman through there, and then the housing market dried up, and I was looking for something new to do. And I thought a lot of my skills transferred over to maintenance. So I started out with a company. A friend of mine was looking for somebody to help get some units ready. She's like, "Hey, I can hire you as maintenance." It's like, "Okay, great." So I started out as a make-ready tech. I was in that position for about 8 months. And then my vice president left and called me and said, "Hey, I want you to come over and work for me as a supervisor." So after 8 months in the industry, I was a supervisor on a 420 unit property that was 30 years old. So it was an extremely large learning curve for me. So I learned quite a bit on that property. I learned a lot of the things to do and not to do. So preventive maintenance wasn't really done on that property. So we can get into that later. But after that, I just kind of bounced around from company to company a little bit. And then I started with Thompson Thrift in December of 18. And I had my property here in Chesterfield, Missouri. I loved it with the company. I loved everything they did. And my director at the time toured my property, and he asked me what my availability was to travel. I was like, I don't know. I'm sure I can go somewhere for you once in a while. I didn't realize that he was setting me up to be the first regional. So I became the first maintenance regional in 2021. And then I was the sole regional for a while after some other staffing issues. And then we hired in a director who basically took me under his wing and showed me everything that I needed to learn to become the director. Then he called me one day. He's like, "Hey, I just want to give you a heads up. I'm leaving and I'm recommending you for the job."
Oh, wow.
Ever since then.
That's amazing. So, I mean, that's a big leap to start as a make-ready tech, coming out of the military, and thank you for serving. How long were you, do you mind if I ask, how long were you in the military?
4 years.
4 years. So, you do your military service, you come into the multifamily industry, you're a make-ready tech, and 8 months from make-ready tech to supervisor. This is one of the reasons why I love talking to people like yourself that have had just weird career paths and experiences. 8 months is not a lot of time to go from make-ready tech to a maintenance supervisor at a 400 plus unit property Do you attribute that to your military background
I think a
at
lot of it,
all, or I'm just just curious? Just
honestly, a lot
curious.
of it was my discipline. Like, I don't get worked up. I don't yell at people. I sit and I work the problem out in my head, or I talk it out. Like, I'm not one to ever go off on people. And I
Yeah,
think that discipline is what I was taught in the military, and that kind of translated into my life going forward.
yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. Just discipline in general, whether it's from a military background or how you were, how you were raised, or just your own personal personality, I guess, is that some of the most successful people that I have gotten to talk to and work with all talk about that discipline, right? No matter how they got it, and especially when you're in a maintenance function, and you get into supervisor and regional roles and director roles, you have to have a real calm demeanor. You have to be able to deal with some of the most difficult situations, um, and be under the, you know, you and I were just talking before I hit the record button about the phones blowing up and the emails blowing up. And is there something that is there a place that you can go to when that gets crazy and you can just maintain that discipline and maintain that calm? Because I know I have it.
Honestly, it's my wife. We've been
Yeah.
together over 20 years. So if I'm having a problem or I'm extremely stressed out, I talk to her for 10 minutes and I feel much better about everything.
Yeah. I do the same thing with my wife, but I'll be honest, I'm a little bit of a mama's boy. Hi, mom. She does listen in. Um, I actually will do that with if I've had a really bad day. I luckily am able to always pick up the phone and talk to her for 15 minutes or 3 hours. It depends on how long my commute home is at any one given day. Um, and I think it's really important especially for maintenance professionals, because we are in the field, we're dealing with so many people on a real personal level in their homes. Is there a time that you ever had to deal with a difficult resident or a really difficult situation? How did you manage not just yourself through that, but probably your team as well? Because that's a difficult thing.
Yeah, I actually have a great example of that. So while I was working on a mid-rise apartment complex, we had a 200-year storm come through and it dropped, I think it was something like 13 inches in an hour. So our entire first floors had water in them. So we got there in the middle of the night. We started taking care of everything. And you have to be that calming presence. You have to be that for your team. You have to be that for the residents. Like, the residents are coming out mad as can be. You have to reassure them, hey, I'm getting this taken care of. I'm really sorry this happened. This is an act of God. There's really nothing we can do about it. And that honestly worked out really well. Like, none of my residents were irate. We had to move a few of them because they had a substantial water damage. But I mean, we had 8 inches of water in the corridors. There was cars floating down the interstate. And if like someone in my position as a service manager at the time would have came in panicked, everyone else would have panicked. So you have to find that little happy place inside your head and use that.
Yeah, I found that early in my career that the calm during the storm is the most important piece, is having that cool level head. Because if you get ramped up with the situation or ramped up with residents and you're matching their level of anger, or their distress, what you're finding is that you're not thinking clearly. Would you agree
You're
with that?
making
Like, I
irrational
think the most clearly
choices.
when I'm the calmest as can be.
Yep. Because
Have
you
you
can't never
ever
do knee jerk reaction to things. Like, nothing good comes out of that. You got to think
so
them through.
I this isn't this isn't where we were gonna not one of the things that we were going to talk about, but I'm really want to dive down this a little bit more if you can go with me, Kenny. Sometimes my guys, my team members, whether that's my on-site team or my regionals, will look at me and say, how can you stay so calm? Has there been a time that you have had similar conversations with your team members, your regionals, that you can
Yeah,
share?
I have a couple of them that get really worked up, and I'm like, guys, you got to take a step. Take a
Yeah.
step back from the problem, walk away, go outside, get some air, have a drink of water, come back in, refocused, and focus on what you're doing. Like, it's the only Like sometimes you just got to walk away from a problem and then come back to it.
Yeah, I find the best time. I find the best answers that I get are when I walk away from a problem. When I actually get up from behind the computer, or I walk away from the piece of equipment that I've been staring at for 20 minutes trying to troubleshoot. Just walk away to
Oh
get
yeah,
that clarity.
100%. You can walk outside, get some fresh air for a few minutes, even if it's cold. It is what it is. Like you're away from the problem, and while you're out there, something just pops in your head. Be like, that's what I need to do to fix it.
That's some really good advice. Along those lines, are you able to train your team members? You said you have some guys that you have, team members that you have to ask to, or suggest that they go for a walk. Are you able to train that? Have you been able to? I know I have. I have a regional that used to get really worked up, and it took me a while, but we really worked on it. We really developed that skill where he's not perfect. None of us are, but he's a lot calmer now in high stress situations. Is that something you've done? And can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe your successes or even your failures of trying to do that?
So I think my best success would be one of my current regionals. He came to me as a service tech 6 years ago. He was more than qualified. He was a service manager somewhere else. I recruited him to come replace me, but everything was the end of the world with him. So I had him work with me a lot and travel with me a lot. And he'd always ask me, he's like, how do you stay so calm? I was like, you've got to understand this isn't the end of the world. I was like, this is an issue. Yeah. So, but take a step back, think at it from different angles. Don't just come straight at it. And I think that was probably one of the biggest successes I've had is watching him do that to his service managers now. As he gives them the same advice and it works out. So it kind of trickles down.
Yes, absolutely. It is nice to see the fruits of that labor, right?
Yeah.
So on the topic of training, I wanted to, you said something interesting to me again before we hit record. In an ideal world, all you want to do is train. Is that a fair synopsis of what you told me?
It is. I love training. I love being able to pass the knowledge that I've collected throughout the years on to the younger generation. There's actually a guy that I'm trying to help out a little bit now. He works for a different company than me. We just happen to meet at an NAA thing. And he's like, hey, we're in the same area. Can I pick your brain? Blah, blah, blah. And he's great. He's going to be probably our bosses one day. He's very young. He's very intelligent, well spoken. So things like that, I love being able to pass that knowledge on and say, well, this is how I would handle it. I would do it your own way, but this is my advice to you.
Yeah. We recently had somebody got promoted into a director role here at Wynn. And the first thing that I did, and he's been a regional with us for quite some time, and first thing I did was picked up the phone and congratulated him and said, hey, listen, I'm here. You don't have to do anything the way that I do it, but I'm here. I'm here as a sounding board. I'll include you on things that I do. And I think that that's something that gets lost with maintenance professionals in general. And I've started to do that a lot more personally, reaching out to other industry peers at different organizations or in different states. So it's nice to hear that you're doing something like that, and making those contacts through NAA is not just the National Apartment Association, but even your local affiliates. People across town from you aren't competition. We're all in this together. We work at different sites. We work at different companies.
Yeah. And it's such a small industry. You never know. They might end up working for us in 10 years or working with us or being our boss. You never know.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So what do you love about training?
It's seeing the things implemented. So like if I go to a property, I try to spend 2 to 4 hours with all the maintenance team, just training them on different systems that we use, different things that I see that they could probably improve on. Or I ask them, well, why would you do it this way? Explain it to me. And then maybe they have a better way than I do on it. So it's learning both ways. And I think the biggest thing I've learned from training is leading by example. I have a really good example of that. We had a property in Florida and it was struggling. Like they were doing the bare minimum to basically keep their jobs. Myself and one of my regionals went down there, and we're on our hands and knees scrubbing baseboards. We're scrubbing the stair treads, all this. Then when we got done, I was like, can I talk to you for a minute? He's like, yeah. I was like, so if I'm in there doing that, why can't you do it? And he's like, well, I guess I didn't really think it was my job. I was like, it doesn't matter if it's your job, but you should take pride in your property. And then we sat there and we went through like the work order stats, and I showed him where he stands with the other properties. And since then, that was, I believe, March of last year, he's became probably my second best service manager.
And all it took was you getting on your hands and knees to do some floor scrubbing, right?
Yeah, it's not uncommon for me to go to a property and I'll be out there doing grounds when they show up, or I'll help them with work orders and be like, hey, let me run these work orders with you, and just to see how they do it.
Yeah. My wife loves when she pulls a pair of work pants out of the laundry and every single cargo pant pocket is full of literal garbage, whether it's the cigarette butts I picked up or, the soda can, or, I will literally just fill up my cargo pants when I'm out of property. So I feel, uh,
Yeah,
I
I'm
feel
horrible
that
with putting
pain.
screws in my pockets. Then I'm like, oh, whoops.
Yeah. I've ruined upholstery on several of my cars over the years doing exactly that.
Yep, same.
Another maintenance problem that our friends and loved ones would not understand when we do that. So you talked a little bit about your hands-on training and your managerial training. As an industry and what you're seeing in the field, what do our maintenance teams really need right now? Like, what is the one thing that if you could shout it from the rooftop, say on a podcast about multifamily maintenance, what should people really be focusing on with their team members?
Honestly, that's a really good question. I think the feedback that I get from my service managers and service techs is they want more on-site training, like more hands-on. They don't like learning from assigned classes and all that. They like the hands-on. Every 2 weeks, we do a call with all of our service managers and we do training on them now. Like they used to be just get them giving us a recap of their property, but they've asked that we do training on them now. So we do training on our different platforms that we use throughout the company. And each time we have a service manager lead it normally. Like, okay, well, why don't you do the training this week? Why don't you do the training this week? And they love it. It empowers them. They feel like their voices are being heard a little bit more. And then that creates more buy-in from everyone in the company.
Yeah, it's really, I've personally have done that as well, taken a little bit of a step back, said, hey, why don't you train on our, this policy, or, talk a little bit about appliance or HVAC repair. And, unfortunately I have a lot of, and much like you, Kenny, a lot of sites that are geographically dispersed. So it's hard to get a group physically together and do that shoulder to shoulder training in a large setting. Um, and, I think
Luckily, we do have a couple of pockets that we can do that in, like Colorado, Arizona, Florida. But like as far as like our Midwest, it's impossible to get everyone together.
yeah, I have similar pockets. I have pockets in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, New York, but then I start to get into New Jersey, and it's very, very, even, I say Pittsburgh, but I have properties an hour north of Pittsburgh and an hour south of Pittsburgh. So that's, kind of a challenge. What are you seeing as the current, especially you're in so many markets, and we're in very different markets, from the states states in the areas that we just listed off in the last couple of minutes. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing with staffing at your properties, and what do you attribute it to?
So it's really hard when, like, say someone's in school and they're like, well, I'm just going to go to a trade. So they go be a HVAC technician. Well, that's great. You know how to fix your air conditioner. But what if your appliances break? What if you have a plumbing leak? What if you have an electrical issue? So I think that's the biggest thing, is trying to explain to them, like, well, yeah, it's great for you to go to the trades and you can get your certification in HVAC. You can do all these things, but that's very one-sided. That's seasonal work. So something that I was on a panel and they were talking about was going to high school career fairs and talking to them about it and saying, well, yeah, you can go into a trade, but that's one-sided. So it's trying to get the interest from the younger generation to get into this industry because we're aging out. Like some of my best techs are now retired. And I mean, we probably have 20 years and we're both out of here. So we need to be finding ways, creative ways to recruit these people, even if it's at a trade school, at a high school, anything like that. Like our biggest issues is getting people in the door.
Yeah. I agree with you on the high school argument, but it's always a challenge for me, right? Whenever we talk about recruiting from high schools, especially with state to state, trades have been eliminated from a lot of high school curriculum, very different than maybe when you and I were in school, where at least we had a basic shop class or we had, opportunities to go to a vocational school, things like that. I like everybody I talk to, and I talk to a lot of people. I've never heard anybody say I got into either property management or maintenance directly out of high school. But that's where we're kind of focusing but we all talk about that's where we should be looking.
Yeah. Like I think I probably have 3 or 4 guys that came straight out of high school to the industry. But other than that, they tried other jobs. Like they tried doing an apprenticeship as an electrician or a plumber and realized they didn't like it. And so they thought they'd do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I like the idea of I'm a big fan of job hoppers. I'm always looking for a job hopper, because there's so many of us in this industry, and I get really excited. You mentioned earlier that you served, but I get very excited when I see a resume of somebody that served in the military, and either they just finished their service, or they're still kind of finding themselves post. Because I've met so many great maintenance professionals that on both the supplier side and in the operation side that actually have come from serving in the armed forces in one form or another.
Yeah, I do have quite a few military guys that work for me, and they're some of my best guys.
Yeah.
Like they're disciplined, they don't get overwhelmed, nobody's shooting at them.
It's true. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the, that discipline, that, sense of calm that people need to have in the very, especially if you're in a challenging market or a challenging community, you need to be able to have that. Yeah, so that's interesting. I think it's an ongoing argument that there's no right answer for, right? Is it high school? Are you looking for job hoppers? I mean, sometimes I get really excited when I'm a retiree who may have worked at a factory for 20 years is looking for, a maintenance job. He just wants to paint apartments. Like he just likes to do that. I try not to pigeonhole candidates or where I'm looking for candidates.
And the way I interview, I'm kind of weird. Like I can read your resume. I know what you can do. I want to know who you are. I want to know what makes you tick, what makes you want to get up and go to work every day. I want to know what kind of personality you have. How are you going to interact with residents? Are you going to take pride in your property? Those are all questions I ask, is different ones tailored around that, because they're going through 2 rounds of interviews before they get to us, right?
Right.
So I can read the resume. I know you're certified in this and this. Tell me about you.
And I think a common question that I get, and maybe you get from property managers and maybe even your service managers, is like, what questions should I ask on a resume? What questions should I ask an interview candidate? It's like the same questions that we asked you when we hired you. Like, we want to know about you. We want to know about you as a person. We want to know what kind of, you can't really ask somebody's background, outside of their work resume, but you want to get a general sense of, is this person going to be good under pressure, or is this person going to be able to think outside the box, which I hate that term, but in our business, you have
It's
to, unfortunately, it's a thing. So how do you find, going back to the training and kind of tying in what we're talking about, the staffing, what are the kind of things that you're talking to your service managers about? Because you talked about how you interview, right? But you said usually before they get to you, and definitely before they get to me, similar situation, they're meeting with 2 or 3 other people. How are you making sure your down chain is getting the information they need before they get to you?
So we have like a list of standard questions that we ask, basic like skills tests, things like that. But even at that, I don't care as much about the skills test as I do the personality. So we do the predictive index as well. It tells us
Oh,
a little
good.
bit about the personality. Because you can teach the skills. You cannot teach somebody to be a good person or take pride in what they do.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to get out of you, Kenny. That's exactly that. That's exactly. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I can train anybody to properly install an appliance, to properly turn an apartment, to troubleshoot an electrical diagram on a piece of equipment or recharge refrigerant. What I can't teach them is personality. I can't
And
teach
personality goes a
personality.
long way.
Well, I have taught personality, but it's a lot harder to train than than it is some of those other things that I mentioned.
Yeah.
So do you have any good stories from your time as a maintenance supervisor? Like what was one of the earliest resident interactions that you can remember? And maybe how did it change you?
So I was working at a property and I looked a lot like I do now, military. And I went to go work on an air conditioner. Like I'd just been with the company for about a month. Like this is when I was a make ready tech, but my service manager was like, "Hey, can you go take a look at this AC?" This lady refused to let me in her apartment. She thought I was a cop. It's like, "That cop ain't coming in here." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Ma'am, I'm really just here to fix your air conditioning." "No, you're not." I was like, "Okay." So I learned to announce myself, wear my name badge, all that stuff very quickly.
I have gotten the wrapping of the car window as I'm sitting in front of my car in front of a property, even in my role. This is in my role now. And gentleman asked me to roll down my window, and I did, and it wasn't the best neighborhood. And he said, "Are you a cop?" And I said, "No, I'm not." And he goes, "Okay, well, you have a good day." And then went across the street and went about his work for the day, which was on the stoop across the street, and it wasn't on my property. And I was like, okay. So I, very much like you, I made sure that I'm constantly wearing my company's logo. I have my ID badge on me
Yep.
to exactly deal with those types of situations. Um, what else? Is there anything else that you are currently working on or that you're really interested in that you want to talk about? I know you were doing some, I know you took part recently and if you want to talk about it, we can. I know you were recently part of a focus group for CAMT. Is that correct?
Yes. So we did go through and we rewrote quite a bit of it. And then we did a survey that came out that we went through and edited, and we're making changes to it, which it'll take a year or two to roll out. But I think they're really good changes. We changed some of the requirements, and then we're focusing like in the HVAC more towards the new refrigerants. All that stuff needs to be included in there now. And then some of it was just very dated.
Yeah.
But it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I
you were
personally
part
haven't
of
even
a.
taken the CAMT yet, but
Oh, it's fun. I will say, for the listening audience, Kenny and the group was part of a job task analysis group that where they're actually just looking at and making recommendations on the CAMT. CAMT is going to get an official rewrite sometime in the next couple of years, and it's something that the National Apartment Association is actively working on. But this group of industry leaders that Kenny was included with, and maintenance professionals from all levels, was actually part of a group to kind of review and provide some feedback on opportunities to either rewrite or improve the current CAMT program. So I do want to make mention of that because I know that you were involved in that, and I want to make sure I explained it. That we have not rewritten CAMT. It has
no,
not been
not yet.
rewritten, but it is something that is being looked at by the Education Institute at the National Apartment Association, NAAEI for short. So what you're in a lot of states. What do you feel are some of your geographical challenges as a director of property
The
maintenance?
geographical challenges are just getting to the sites. So, for example, in 2 weeks, I'm going down to Florida and I'm going to visit 8 of the 10 sites down there, or 8 of the 12. And I won't be able to get back down there for a couple months because then I need to go to Colorado and do the same. And then when I get to the Midwest, then it's 1 or 2 properties at most a week. So it's just trying to get out and see the properties, see the teams, give them that support that they need.
Yeah, I had a maintenance supervisor tell one of my regionals recently, that I don't like him. And my regional's like, "What do you mean Chris doesn't like you?" And he goes, "Well, he never comes to my site."
That's a
And,
good thing.
and exactly. And my regional was smart enough he without a beat, he said it's because that's a good thing, right? But yeah, especially in as you advance higher up and depending on your organization, regionals could be covering multiple cities and states. Directors like ourselves and VP and vice presidents are covering numerous assets. I'd love to physically get in front of every single one of my sites every single week or every single month. It's just not feasible.
No,
Um,
it's hard to even get to them once a year at this point, just because of how
because you have
spread
so
out they
many
are.
sites. Yeah. And it is a lot of travel. We spend probably more
Yeah,
time in the
I
car
was
than a
trying to
plane
do
than we'd
it
like.
twice a year, and I just could not keep up. It was like 17 weeks in a row with only being home on the weekends, and that does not make for a happy wife.
No, and my very first episode of this podcast was all about happy wife, happy life, and uh, I'm just about to start my traveling. I have quite a few heavy months of travel in April, May, and June, both for work and volunteerism efforts that I'm doing in several other states. So yeah, I try to keep my travel limited to the need to instead of the want to, because there's plenty of want to
Yeah,
travel. We all have
it's like,
want to
well,
travel, and I'm not talking vacation. I have want to travel to visit sites and see people and do things, but I have to
yeah, and
stick to
that's
the
the
need
great
to
thing
now.
about Angie is she made me start looking at things that way. Like she's like, "So why are you going to that side?" I was like, "Well, I haven't been there in 6 months." She's like, "But what's your reasoning?" I was like, "Actually, I don't really have a reason to go." You're right. Okay.
And the one of the nice things. So I keep in touch with a lot of my team members through technology now, right? So how are you staying in touch with those people that you don't get to see very often in person?
So we have multiple Teams channels, and I'll call check in on them on the phone or on Teams if I see that they're green. I know that they're at their computer doing something, so I can just pop in and be like, "Hey, just want to check on you, see how everything was." But for the most part, it's I try to call all my guys at least once a month, and then if not, we still see each other on the biweekly service manager calls, and then we have like a maintenance chat with techs, groundskeepers, service managers, regionals, all that. Which that one's a really good one for them because they can bounce ideas and questions off each other without having to worry about, well, I don't want to ask in front of a bunch of people. Well, you're just asking maintenance guys. Like we've all had a million questions throughout our careers.
Yeah. I was just today, actually, the day that we're recording this, I was at the Pennsylvania Apartment Association's trade show and expo. So big shout out to PAA, who threw a fantastic expo in the Philadelphia area. And I was talking to a regional from from another organization, and he had me he had me laughing with this story about. Let me make sure I tell it right. He's talking about his maintenance. I asked him what his relationship like was his director. This is what I do all day, right? I know what my relationship was with my regionals. I like to learn from other directors and other regionals, and whether you're a porter or you're the CEO of the company, I'm always trying to learn something. So I was asking this regional from another organization, how often do you talk to your director? And I know what my frequency is. And he just looked at me, and it's funny because one of my regionals was with me. This other regional from a completely different organization looked at me and said, "Oh, I don't ever talk to my director." And I'm like, is he your supervisor? Because now I got to like figure out, like, now I have to like really ask questions, right? And he's like, yeah, I just never talked to him. And I was like, what does never mean? And he's like, oh, I only call him when I have to. And I'm like, you're giving me a lot of non-answers right now. Like, I'm a by the numbers guy. So I looked at him, and we'll call him Johnny for the sake of the story. And I said, Johnny, I said, how many, if I was to look at your phone right now, how many calls would there be to this person in the last 6 months? And he goes, one. And I said, it just blew me away. So to hear that you're able to reach out to your service managers at the frequency that you do, and you have biweekly meetings, that is so important, because that regional is running his own little area, and I'm sure he's doing a great job. But I heard what I was hearing, and kind of had a little bit of intimation from what he was saying to me, was that he didn't feel supported by his director. That was, I read his body language, how he was telling me, how he was answering the questions. It wasn't like, oh, I'm perfect, so we never talk. He literally felt not supported. So
That's a
it's
horrible
great to
feeling
hear
to
that
have.
you are really doing that.
Yeah, I've had directors in the past that they would only call you when they needed something. And as I moved up through the ranks, I said, I will never be that kind of leader for these guys. I was like, I will be their support. Even though it's not necessarily our jobs to do that, they feel that support from us. And then that cascades down to their team. Their service techs are going to come up and ask them more questions because they see them doing it to me.
Yeah. I have 5 regionals. I talk to each one of them almost every single day, whether it's 5 minutes or it could be as upwards of an hour. They have literally gotten together. If it's like 3:00 in the afternoon, they'll start texting each other to see, like, am I okay? And that's for me, that's like team, right? They want to know, like, so then one of they draw straws. All right, who's going to actually just pick up the phone, and we haven't heard from Chris all day. Then they'll call me, and I'm like, oh, I was just buried deep in a project, or, and they're like, okay, we just thought something was wrong because we hadn't heard from you all day.
Now, I'm really fortunate that my guys communicate with me on a daily basis, my regionals. Like, we talk probably anywhere from, like I said, 5 minutes to an hour every day. Just a quick download on what they have going on, or if they need advice on something, or if they just want to loop me in, or just seeing how our day's going.
Yeah, and that constant communication makes the stresses of the really difficult situations a little bit easier, because then they're not just calling you, or you're not just calling them when there's a crisis.
Yeah. So, like, my guy Andrew, like, if I know he's having a rough time, I'll call him and be like, hey, you want to talk for a little bit? He's like, sure. And then I'm like, well, how's Emily? How's everything going? And we'll just sit and talk for 20 minutes, and then he feels much better, and he's right back to work.
Yeah. It's just it's not always about the work. As you said earlier, our jobs, it's not the end of the world, what we do.
Nope, we're not saving lives for the most part. Like, we're making sure that our residents are comfortable and that we're moving forward as a company.
So what's next for you, Kenny? Is what's going on at Thompson Thrift?
Not a ton.
Just living
We
the
just got
dream?
named. Oh yeah, I love my company. I've been here for a little over 6 years now, and, like, they do so many great things for us. During COVID, they paid us to sit at home. So we have Marathon Health. It's free health insurance or free healthcare for telehealth. We have flex spending accounts. We have Forma that they give us $100 a month just to go out with our families. Like, little things like that are huge to me, and it shows that my ownership cares.
And I think you were just about to say it, but I just saw recently that Thompson Thrift was named one of the top 150 workplaces in the U.S. Is that correct?
I believe that is 3 years in a row.
And what organization is doing that top places to work?
I closed my email.
It's okay. But no, that's great to be working for such a great organization like that. That they sound like they're very good to you and the people that work with them and for them. So, thank you.
They've always been great to me. I had some struggles early in my career with them, and they helped me through them. And I've been promoted twice since. Like, I love my company.
That's amazing to hear. So as we wind down on this episode of Beyond the Work, Kenny, thank you so much for joining me today, talking about your experiences and some of the things that really matter to our team members, whether it's the training or the communication. It really means a lot to hear, and for the audience to hear that this is, you've had a lot of success with all of this with your organization, and you're training the next leaders, whether they're going to take your job tomorrow or they're going to take your job in 5 years.
If we're not training somebody to replace us, we're in the wrong position.
So, Kenny, thank you again for joining me today. To my audience, thank you for joining us for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. Please like, subscribe, share, and check out my other podcast with my two friends, Mark Sharp and Paul Rhodes, here on the Multifamily Media Network, called The Turnover. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining me for this episode. No matter how long you've been in our industry, or what position you have at your company or your community, everyone has a maintenance story to tell. Go to www.multifamilymedianetwork.com and leave me a voice message, or share your information and we can tell your tale together on a future episode. Please check out our sponsors and like, subscribe, and follow to this podcast or video, and join the Multifamily Media News Network newsletter for upcoming shows and blogs from me and the other great hosts on our network. Our stories all connect us. See you for the next chapter.